Hello, welcome to today's webinar at Notes Code. Want to give a special thank you out to BCC for preparing this presentation for you today, and appreciate your time for attending. Want to introduce our presenter as Tim Clark from BCC, well known in our notes industry, so we're happy to have him do this presentation. So Tim, I'm going to turn the time over to you. Oh, before I do that, just to let everyone know, there will be time at the end of the presentation for questions and answers. So if you want to ask a question or something comes up to you during the demos, if you'll type that into the GoToWebinar control panel under the questions section, then the questions will be queued up and ready for me to ask Tim at the end of his presentation. So that's kind of the last housekeeping item there. But so Tim, the time is now yours.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Scott, and thanks for hosting this for us again this month. So hello, everyone. Welcome to BCC's Mail Migration Engine webinar. This was billed as Mail Migration Made Easy, and let's hope that we can give you that to take away, that we can make mail migration easy. So without further ado, I'm going to get on into the presentation. Please put your questions, as Scott said, into the chat windows or whatever it is you have on your screen, and we'll get through them as soon as we can when we get to the presentation, the end of the presentation. So I'm going to give you a tiny little bit about BCC and who we are, why we're in this space and what we're doing, and then we're going to do some migration. We're actually going to migrate a user's mail file today from Domino to Exchange, and then we're going to take it a step further and show you that it is not, even though that's our heritage and we've come from the Domino side of the world, we're still able to do stuff in the Microsoft side of the world. So I'm going to show you migrating or updating your mail, as it were, from Exchange into Office 365. Might skip through a few slides really fast to get to those demos and show you that code live working. But if I do that, then what I'll do is Scott and I will make the presentation slides and the deck available to you to read at your leisure after the presentation. We've got a lot to get through today, so I'm going to keep going. And if you do have questions, please put them in the chat. So let's get going on migration. So, slide past. So we've got three parts to our offering. The first is the mail migration, and we can do notes to Exchange in Office 365. We can also now do Exchange to Office 365 or Exchange. Got a customer at the moment actually who's doing Exchange to Exchange through a merger and acquisition. And we can also do Office 365 to Office 365 or Exchange, if that's your wish. And we can also take simple applications. I'm not going to show that today, but I'll show that we're going to do a video for that on our YouTube channel and talk about a little bit about that at the end. But we're going to be able to do simple HTML applications and put them, simple notes applications, put them out to HTML so that you can still surface those. If your goal is really to turn off that Domino server, and we know that a bunch of our customers are considering that, then what are you going to do with all that simple application data when you're done with the mail migration, right? If you're upgrading from Exchange to Office 365, we don't have any tooling yet to help you move your SharePoint applications up to the new versions of SharePoint or put them into the cloud, but I'm fairly sure that if you come to us with that as a requirement, then we could make that happen for you fairly quickly. The other strands to what we do is mail management over there on the right-hand side. We already do signature branding disclaimers, virus checking, PGP encryption of mails, secure document transfer encrypting mails into PDFs for the Domino platform. That's our Mail Protect offering. And we're extending that out into Exchange, and that will be available for Exchange later in this quarter or early next quarter, I believe. So you will be able to do all of that good signature stuff and PGP compliance and all of that security stuff around your mail for Exchange later this quarter. The last bit, which is going to be a webinar in its own right in a month's time or so, is identity management and access governance. So how do you simplify the management of your Active Directory? We can already do this for the Domino directory, but how do you simplify, if you're moving from Domino, you've got this great thing called the Domino admin tool, You can manage your groups and users in there fairly simply, and you've been using it for years. But the management is slightly different in Active Directory, and especially when you get into Office 365. And the users and groups and the license management, especially assigned to each user, starts to get a bit onerous. So we're simplifying that with our admin tool, BCC's admin tool, and we'll do a webinar on that a couple of months' time, I think it's scheduled for, to take you through what we're able to do in and around the Domino environment and also in and around Active Directory and Office 365. So, our complete offering set, we're not talking about all of these things today, but the complete offering set covers stuff like all of these applications you see underneath. So anything to do with Azure and Active Directory and Office 365 and Exchange, as well as Box. And we can output stuff into Splunk. We can control users in Cisco WebEx. We also manage IBM's cloud and the IBM social applications in total. So again, the three strands that go into that are identity management, access governance, mail migration, and mail management. So we've done a bunch of migrations already, even though we've only had the migration tooling in our Domino, in our Mail Protect product for something like 9 months now. But we've done a bunch of migrations already. And what we've learned from our customers that we've spoken to, when they're going from Domino to Microsoft or other platforms, actually 80% of them leave behind applications because they don't know what to do with them or where to put them or how to get them out. And we're not going to do massive, very complicated application migration strategies for you because there's other partners that are doing that. That's not where we're focusing. But we are focusing on getting very simple applications. Think of Team Room and Document Library and Journals and Mail Archives, and getting them out into a usable format. So that could be taking them out and putting them into static HTML, or it could be that you want to put them into PDFs to put into some document management system. And we can do either of those things and give you access to that data that you wouldn't normally have considered being very simple, okay? We know that there's going to be applications that you can't move because they're really, really complicated. They're really tied in and they've evolved in the best terms of development. They've evolved over 20 years or so to run your company. And we're gonna, you know, we're not going to turn you away, but it's certainly not our focus to actually migrate those really complicated apps for you. We're going to focus on coexistence of your platforms in the future. So we're going to take this into 3 phases, if you like. So we've got the first phase, which is the planning. So we'll have a look with you about what you've got, work out what you can shrink and consolidate in your Domino environment, or, you know, we're talking here primarily about Domino to start with, and then we'll go through the migration process. Once we've done the migration, we'll do your coexistence of your Domino applications, and that would mean things like making sure that mail gets sent from your application to your new platform, whatever that is, migration of the mail data, and changing over your users from the Domino side of the world to your new Microsoft world. And then we talk about operational management and coexistence. And what do we mean by that? So it's about making sure that while you're getting your application base slimmed down and migrated out, you can actually still use the applications. So we have this little tiny coexistence piece that's mentioned in the previous column that allows you to format those mails correctly when they come out of Domino, make sure they get to the right place in terms of mail destination, and also make sure that you can reduce your license count in Domino so that you don't have to pay more than you should pay now that you've migrated your users out. So you don't really want to have a person record in Domino to you know, have a charge for that client that's actually never using the application anymore because it's now in an HTML base somewhere. So we can help you reduce those costs as well. So I'm going to skip over the analysis because this is, you know, a lot of Domino stuff in here, and you can read this stuff when you download the presentation. We do a lot of work with customers when we do the migration And what we do is we help them work out exactly what it is that they need to migrate. That's one of the biggest questions. What are you actually going to migrate? Now, if you go to Microsoft and want to do a fast track, and it doesn't matter which platform you're coming from, going into Office 365 on their Microsoft Fast Track platform, they'll only allow you 90 days of mail data, which is great if that's all you want. But if you want more, then what you have to do is you have to employ some other strategy to get that stuff out of your existing platform into Office 365. Well, we didn't think that was particularly useful, and we've taken a different attack to this, and I hope you'll notice the difference when we get to it. We believe that actually the pain of mail migration is all about that coexistence piece. So how do I keep two systems running at the same time? And the reason we've made mail migration easy is we don't want you to keep two mail systems running at the same time in use. So we want you to use one system, the system that you're using already, whether that's Exchange or Domino, and keep running that for as long as you need to. Once your mail has been migrated over, the main bulk of it will run through each mail file, take each document, work out what to do with it, and then put it into the system at the other end, the target system. Once we've gone through that process for every mail file, for everything that appears inside that mail file, we will then go into what we call a sync mode, where we take any changes to the mail file and push them across into the target system. And then when you're ready, when everyone's happy that they've got, pretty much all of the mail that they've had in their previous mail system, and you've done your user training and everybody knows how to log in and all of that good stuff happens, what we will do is we will cut over a weekend normally, all of your users from your old mail system on a Friday night. You turn it off, you switch over the MX records to the new system, the SMTP routing gets changed, all of that good stuff happens in a fraction of a second or two. And then we start doing a thing called a delta sync. So what we do is we take all of the old mail, we make sure that we've got access to it all, we push all of the changes that have happened since the last time their mail file was synced, and we push that out to the new target system. So hopefully come Monday morning, everyone's got everything that we're working on Friday, and everyone logs into their new mail system, and off we go from there. Now, we understand that can be a bit of a challenge for some organizations, so you can stage this in what we would call logical groups. So you can, for instance, if you were to say, right, I need to take all of the marketing department in one go, we'll do that. Okay, we'll do sales next, or we'll do HR last, or whatever. You can break it up. We would normally recommend that you do that around groups of people that collaborate with each other regularly. So that would be things like people that send emails to each other the most, people that schedule meetings with each other the most, so that you don't need any of the, quite frankly, tiresome free busy time lookup stuff that everyone seems to go, actually, do you know what, I can't do any mail migration without being able to message someone in the back end, which is fine. We can do that if you want to go across two systems. But that whole scheduling a calendar entry across two systems, even with the best tool in the world, with the best tool in the world, it doesn't work properly because the calendar engines underneath these two systems or underneath systems are so different. If you're going from Exchange to Office 365, that's really simple. Okay, that's very easy to do. If you're going from Domino to Exchange or Domino to Office 365, it's one of the biggest pains you will face. So our methodology, our way of approaching this actually takes away that pain by showing you that actually you don't really need it, and it will cause you the biggest headaches, and it will cost you a lot of time and effort, when actually we're migrating a company of over 100,000 users this year, and they're not doing any coexistence at all, because they've decided to do it in this group method. We've migrated a company in America recently who hasn't done it either, and they've just turned the people on Monday morning and it all works fine. Yes, their help desk takes a bit of a hit for the first couple of days with people who can't remember their passwords, but if you've been pushing people the week before into the system to make sure that you smooth out that curve, that's fine, and it works just great. Okay, so let's get to the big I'd like to say the elephant in the room, but seeing as you guys aren't talking to me at the moment, then it's probably not an elephant in the room yet. The biggest challenge you'll face going from any system to a different mail system is what to do with encrypted data and how do you manage that. Now, if you're lucky enough to be going from Exchange or Office 365 and you already have SMIME certificates deployed inside your Active Directory and you're going to another Microsoft platform and you're using your same Active Directory at the other end, then you're laughing. You have nothing to do. You just migrate the data and off you go. If, however, you're going from Domino, which has its own private key infrastructure, and you're going to a Microsoft world, then you have some work to do, or you have some thinking to do at least about what you do. How do you decrypt the mails? How do you migrate that data securely? And how do you, or what do you do at the other end with that data when it gets there? So the first thing is, how do you decrypt it? Now, competitors in this space will have you decrypt it all by hand, have users click a button in their mail file, and guess what? When you ask a user to do something, 60% of them will actually do what you ask, 40% of them won't bother, or will do the wrong thing, so that you end up with 40% of your mail migration being a ticket at your support desk because half of it didn't work by the time you get to it. So we've taken that pain away by actually doing what is, to us, blindingly obvious. We take the user's ID file from an ID vault, a certificate store, whatever, wherever you've got it available to them. And if you don't have it available to them, we can actually extract it from the Notes client and use that in our own secure tools. So things like Admin Tool and Client Genie can extract the ID file, make sure that it's securely stored, even create you an ID vault to put it in, and then we can use that ID to decrypt any messages that are in the Notes mail file. We can then, with the decrypted message, send that to Exchange or Office 365, and either using SMIME certificates, if you have them deployed already, we can use those, or if you don't have any certificates deployed, we could, if you still need that message encrypted, we can deploy it to a password protected PDF that then encrypts the message and deploy that into the target email system. So you still have your data safe and secure. You don't need to deploy a big certificate infrastructure, and you could still have secured, encrypted messages. That's all great, but doesn't that cause the migration engine to slow down, and don't we have to install masses of client migration farms to do all of that stuff? Well, no. Because the mail migration engine runs on the Domino server itself as a server task and a server add-in, we actually act as the server. So we have all the rights we need already to get into the user's mail file, because the mail server in Domino already has manager access to the user's mail file, which means that no human actually ever touches your CEOs, your board of directors, whoever's the VIPs are in your company, never touches their mail file, never sees it, never has access to it. Then you migrate it out to Exchange and Office 365 or whatever, and you still don't have access to it because you don't need it as an administrator. The task, the server has access to it, and the data gets out, it's re-encrypted, and everyone's happy. Much better than setting up 30 different technical user IDs and 30 Notes clients or whatever you're doing to actually migrate that data and decrypt it and re-encrypt it on the fly. A lot simpler, a lot more secure, and a lot faster, because you've got the power of your server running your migration rather than a bunch of Notes clients or client machines. So the scale of the infrastructure is bigger, the processor power is bigger, the amount of memory available is bigger. The internet throughputs are normally bigger to the servers than you get to clients. So therefore, we think it's a much better solution to be using the server to actually push that stuff across. So I've talked about some of the migration tools already, and now I'm going to break with tradition or break with my script and actually show you a migration, because my voice needs a rest because I'm starting to get a dry throat already. So let's see if I can get to my server. So here is a mail migration engine. This is running as a virtual machine, you'll notice, and we have this installed inside BCC. We also have migration engines available in the Azure virtual machines in the cloud. So if you do want to do this and don't have a Domino server, don't worry about it. If you want to go from Exchange to Office 365, We can run you through our cloud service to do the mail migration out in the cloud. You never need to install or understand Domino because there's a web interface to it as well. So we can manage all of that for you and with you and make sure that your mail gets migrated across without any pain to you. For the people going from Domino to another platform, Microsoft in this case, we're going to show you how this works from a Domino side of things. And when I do the Exchange to Office 365 migration, I'll use the web interface to show you how that looks. So here inside the Notes client, where's my mouse gone? Oh. Okay, there it is. Right, awesome. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a migration for Montgomery Scott. The very eagle-eyed amongst you will notice that the person that set up this domain, this demo was a bit of a Star Trek fan, so all of the users are to do with Star Trek. I can't say I've been a fan myself, so I'm just going to call him Montgomery Scott, or Scotty. So you can see here we've got two documents for this. This is the document for the configuration, and then underneath this we've got a schedule document that tells us when to run the migration. So if we were to do the initial data push, as I call it, for the main bulk of the mail migration, so taking his, whatever it could be, 30 meg mail file or 7 gig mail file, whatever it would be, and pushing that across to the new server, this would run the first time, and then you would schedule it to run at intervals, maybe once a day or at weekends, until you go live. And then this is the schedule document that would control that. But the document we're really interested in at the moment is how do we actually migrate the data out, and what's the configuration that we have available to us. So the first thing we need to see is this is our migration document for an EWS, an Exchange Web Services migration for the mail file of Scotty, and we are re-encrypting using SMIME. So we have a certificate store with his X509 certificate in it, and we also have access to his Notes ID to decrypt any mail from the ID vault. So we're using this thing called Exchange Web Services, EWS, to do the migration. And now we have some style sheets that allow us to format the mail and the calendar entries and stuff like that when they go out of this mail file, the Notes mail file, and out to Exchange. So these are just standard CSS and some attachments, some logos and stuff like that that get referenced. So standard kind of HTML formatting to allow you to make it look and feel how you want and fit in with your corporate identity. Number of working threads, this is how much stress you're going to put on the Exchange Web Service at the other end. For Office 365, you can run this at 14 is the maximum you're allowed. Depending on what you've got configured on your Exchange server is, well, that's the discussion we'll have when we get to it. But we can configure the amount of load you put on the Exchange web server so that you don't overload it if it's a live web server and people are using it for Exchange and mail already. How do we actually get into the mail file is listed here, and which mail file are we actually taking. You can put wildcards in here. So you could put, for instance, we did a migration recently where we did it by alphabet. So we did mail/a*.nsf, and we didn't search any folders recursively. You could if you wanted to. You could, if you've got your mail directories spread across different subdirectories, you could start at the top level and search recursively through all of them. By default, it doesn't. You can exclude certain databases. So if you wanted to set up a configuration document, not just for one mail file, but for like a group of VIPs, you could list their mail files here and exclude everyone else. What are we actually migrating? Well, we have the ability to migrate the mail, a mail archive, a resource database, personal address books if people haven't already pushed their contacts into their mail file, or a custom template, which is how we get things like the journals and the document stores out into HTML. What are we actually going to include? We're going to include everything at this point. You could put an @ formula in here to say only take @form equals memo, and then that would only take the memos and no responses or no calendar entries. And you can exclude things. You could do it via folders if you wanted to, and you can take a date range. So if you wanted to do that 90 days only, I'm only wanting to take 90 days of mail for everyone because that's all I want to take, and everything else can sit in an archive somewhere. And we have customers that do that. You can define that here. Do you want to take any documents that have an attachment? And if you do you want to explicitly exclude any extensions? And are you going to take the trash folder, yes or no? So that's it for this particular tab. And then we get to the, what are we going to do? So execute the query actions. Oh, I need to be in edit mode. As you can see, this is very granular. We can get a lot of configuration in here. Now we can say, don't start this particular migration before certain time, and what to do if, or what you're going to do before you start the migration. You could run some actions, you could run some agents. If you wanted to run that agent on behalf of the user to decrypt all their mail because you don't have access to their Notes ID, then you could run that here. What are we actually going to export and how do we do it? This is the bit where we connect to the Exchange server, and you can see here this is the URL that we're connecting to. This is Exchange Web Service, and this is where we put in the one technical user that we need to create that has a special role inside the Active Directory and Exchange. This one user is in place of the 15, 30 something users you would normally be asked to create if you're doing a client migration farm. So you just create the one, and that person has to have the role of application impersonation. And once that's set on that person, that means they're allowed to impersonate other users inside that mail system. So what we're going to do here is we're going to say we're going to cloud.int, that's our Exchange domain. We're going from, I think it's saturn.bcc.biz as our, or saturn.universe.local as our existing domain. And then some connection timeouts. What are we going to do with errors? Are we going to delete anything? Here's an interesting one. We had a customer recently where they did some training with users where they allowed them into their mail files before they started the migration. So they trained their sort of core users that were going to help train everybody else, and they let them play with and use their Exchange mailboxes before they did the migration. When we did the migration, we set up this task so that it deleted all entries in the Exchange mailbox, but only did it the once, only did it on this next run. So anything they'd been playing with was cleaned away, and then all of their migrated data was good, and we knew that there was a clean system to play with when we got in there. I would suggest that you, once that's run once like that, it will then switch back to this mode. Don't delete entries in Exchange, and then you can do sync as you go. We had an experience recently where a user gave us a list of people that were changing names between two different mail systems. So they're going from Notes and Domino, for instance, into Office 365, but they already had some users in Office 365, and that meant that they would have had some email address conflicts. That meant that we had to have a list of people that were changing their email address, and we did that at this point. So we statically changed their address in the migration to make sure that we got to the right target mailbox to put the information into it. Sadly, some of the information that they gave us wasn't correct, and we ended up putting somebody's mail in somebody else's mail file. Not the best solution, especially if, for instance, you've got let's say you've got a receptionist or somebody doing some admin in your company, and you manage to put one of the board of directors' mail into their mail file. Not the best political situation. Similarly, you wouldn't want to put the receptionist's mail into the board member's mail file either. So we have the ability to back out anything that we've synced already. So you can delete all synced entries, and that's how you would then fix that particular issue if it happens. And that's about it for this screen, apart from to say you can do things like push things into certain folders. You can include, you can specify how long reservations should last, or things like repeating anniversaries, how long you're going to make them last for. And then here's the we have some post actions, right? Okay, yeah. So the migration happens, and you get to choose what happens if the migration gets to a certain percentage of success. Now, we did the migration we did recently for a user going from Domino to Office 365 had a 99.6% success rate, and there are things that don't translate well, or there are things that we find in the migration that just don't exist anymore. So, for instance, they had a one user had a bunch of emails that had been sent from some system that happened to be a blog that had now been deleted. So any of the URL links for the images didn't work anymore because that blog was gone. So that gave us that triggered an error in the mail migration. So we could suppress those once we worked out what they were, but we had to see them to start with. So we got a 96 or 99.6%, I think it was in the end, across their mail file migration. So at the end of the migration, if this is deemed to be successful, you can run an action to say, once this is set, then set the ACL to read only, or make sure that you send an email to the user saying your mail is now migrated, you should be using Exchange or Office. So you can do a bunch of things at that point. And then this is how we work out what we're going to decrypt or re-encrypt. So we're going to re-encrypt at this point. We're going to use SMIME, and we're going to mark anything as private that's in the calendar. Interestingly, Notes and Domino has this ability to make anything or any document inside it encrypted, because the way you access Notes and Domino is through a Notes ID, which is a private key infrastructure. Unfortunately, other mail systems don't follow that model, which means that you can't encrypt a calendar entry or a contact or a task in Exchange or Office 365, which means that we have to do something with them if they are encrypted in the note side of things. So what we do is we mark them as private where we can, or we could encrypt it into a PDF if that data still has to be password protected in some format, so that somebody couldn't just log in and see it. And this is how we get the ID and how we do the where we get the certificate from for the SMIME certificate. And then what are we going to log? Everything's logged. Every transaction for every document gets logged if that's what you want. If you want that absolute granular level of detail, we can provide it. So let's close that down, save my changes, yes. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this migration. So I'm going to run this as soon as possible. So you could do this ad hoc or on demand or manually or whatever you want to call it. And if I run that now and take a look at the Domino server, this is the bit you'll never need to see normally, because this will just run away in the background. You can see here that our migration has started, and we're migrating his mail into his mail file. What I should have done, I just realized, is I should have showed you his mail file before we migrated all the mail into it. But this is his Office Web Access or Outlook Web Access, sorry, mail file, and you can see here that this this mail is encrypted. So this mail, when you look at it in Notes, would have been encrypted, and because you've got access to the key, it would have shown you this particular mail straight away. But in Exchange and Office 365, it works slightly differently. What happens is you can't see that in the inbox. You have to click here to open up the mail. It goes and checks the key against the Active Directory. It shows you this little key here to show you. Okay, so allow that credential, and now you can see the data, much use it is, but you can see that this is an encrypted mail and it's still secure and it's been migrated properly. What you'll also see is there are some really good fidelity between the systems. This isn't a particularly good example, although it's quite amusing. You've got the fidelity of data being migrated across. So if I can find a better example. So here you can see we've got document links back to Notes and Domino. We've got tables that have been produced. That's all coming through just fine. I hope this one looks as good as I thought it would. Yeah, so this one here, you can see we've got attachments. We've got inline attachments. They would normally get moved to the top. We've got rich text coming through, code samples. The fidelity of the messages between the two systems is very good. We've also got folders that have come through, for instance. So if I show you here, here's a home folder that's come through. We've got calendar entries that have come through, and that's all great. Now, if I just quickly switch from, this is his office.com, so this is Office 365. if I take a look, you'll see that his Montgomery Scott's mail file is absolutely empty over here in Office 365. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to migrate that using the web interface. I'm just looking at the time. Awesome, we've got plenty of time to do this. Come on, log in. There we go. So here's the web interface version of what we saw in the Notes client. So if you're not a Notes shop or don't want to use a Notes client to get to this, this is how we would do this in the cloud for the Azure servers. Or if you're going from Exchange to Office or Office to Exchange or whichever way around in the Microsoft world, this is how we would help you run your migration. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go EWS migration from Exchange to Office 365 Montgomery Scott. I can click down here, or I can click on this link here and then do run as soon as possible. What that's going to do is that's going to take the information from his Exchange that we just migrated. You'll see it kicking off here. Normally you wouldn't see this, but I can show you the back end for the demo purposes today. This is the Exchange going to Office 365. You would normally just see an entry in the log file that says this has been done and this is migrated properly. So as you can see, this is now finished. And if we look down, we can see that it took 17 seconds. It's not a particularly big mail file, but that's on purpose because of this being just a demo. So now if we take a look at his inbox, we'll see that all the mail that was in his Exchange mail file is now over here. And again, we can take a look at it and see that it's all still encrypted and all still using the same mechanisms to look at encrypted data. And there we have that awesome piece of ASCII art. So again, you'll see that calendar entries have come through. We've got all of the contacts that have come through from his local address book in Notes into Exchange and then across into Office 365. And then we've got two tasks that have come through. And again, we've got due dates and all the information that we had, whether it's high priority or not, and all the text that went with it. So as you can see, the migrations work just fine between them. Let's show you some of the logging that comes with them. So if we go back to here and look at the log file, we shrink this down. What you'll see is you'll see some statistics here and the database technical log. So let's take a look at the technical log. This is when we went from Notes and Domino to Exchange, and you'll see that anything that's an error or something that we want to check out is all in red. And then we look through every single mail in the mail file, or every single document, should I say, and we then push that out to Exchange. What we also get to make that a bit simpler, and this makes a lot more sense if you're doing a lot of users on batch, what you can see is you get an Excel spreadsheet here that allows you to see which mail file, what the database type was, how many documents we found, what went across, what was decrypted, what was re-encrypted. All of that stuff gets pushed into this spreadsheet. And you can see here the elapsed time that it took. Actually, that calculation is not working out that it was 10 seconds, but yeah, that took 10 seconds and we had reoccurring instances 16. So you can see some good information in there, and we get exactly the same when we go from Exchange to Office 365. So you can see here we've got the technical log that shows us all the information about every mail message that was in Exchange. And then we have the Excel spreadsheet that goes along with that to show us exactly what was migrated. So this one's formatted a little differently, but that's because most of these are for individuals. So you can see here the folder that we were migrating from and what the status was, if it was empty, you know, what we had in the source, what was there before, what was created afterwards, how many we created. So this would have been a Delta sync, and this has now put in new entries into that Office 365 account. So I hope you agree that, you know, that setting up one configuration document to do the migration between the systems, getting the log file for each mail file that gets created or migrated is fairly simple. The Exchange to Office 365 options, for those of you who are interested, aren't that different. there's just 5 tabs to work through, but again, the number of working threads, how are you going to deal with things when you push stuff out there? Are you going to delete everything before you go? How do you connect to the mail file in Exchange? How do you connect to the mail file in Office 365? And any comments that you wanted to create against that. So very simple way of migrating information across, very good way of managing it, and really robust server transactional system underneath it, making sure that this stuff happens for you. So back to the presentation. So we have the mail migration engine for Domino. It's also for Exchange and Office 365 now. We have a coexistence gateway, which isn't coexistence between calendaring systems, but it's all about delivering messages out of Domino to Exchange in the proper format to make sure that any links get migrated to HTML links, any names get changed to the right email address, making sure that you can then reduce the number of names listed in your Domino address book, because you don't need to have them listed there. You can have them listed somewhere else, and therefore you don't pay client access fees for them. We have the migration engine for Webmail Archive. That allows you to take things like your server-based or client-based archives off of the user's account in Notes and Domino and push them up into Office 365 Webmail Archive. The great thing about Office 365 accounts, if you have one, is that the mail file size for the archive is actually unlimited. There is no storage limitations at all on that. So if you did want to migrate your archive information out to the web and have that available, then you could do that with an Office 365 account and actually not have any mail storage limitations at all. So we do some pre-work. If you want to look at local data, we can help you with the migration of local contacts into your mail file, or we can migrate the local contacts by pushing them up onto the server and then migrating those personal name and address books into your contacts in the cloud, as it were, or into Exchange. Or we can do this small application conversion for you, which is very simple. Looks very interesting when you see it. I think I've got an example of it here. He says, looking quickly down his slide deck, but he's not going to get all the way through. So let's actually migrate across here a bit and show you the architecture. So the way that this will work, go back up one. The way that this will work is that the mail migration engine sits here on a Domino server, normally your Domino mail server, or something that has access to all the mail files. So it's a server, it has a server ID, it's very secure, and if you use something like Domino Mail Protect, you can add a password to that server ID to make sure that nobody can access that mail data without knowing the password. You could use admin tool to create a trust center if you don't have ID Vault set up or don't have access to all of the user IDs, and you can create that trust center to be used during the migration time to do decryption of messages, or you can add into that SMIME certificates to do re-encryption. Once that's all done and configured, you would then push your information across to Exchange or Office 365. The way this looks for Exchange or Office 365 is pretty similar, apart from the fact you have, at this point here, you have the Exchange mail servers or the Office 365 accounts and another one of those cloud bubbles with the target system in it. So if this is the source system, your target system, and the mail would flow from here into the mail migration engine where it would do its work, never seen by a human, don't forget, only seen by the server task, and then pushed out to your target system. So very secure, very safe, very controllable. I just want to show you one example of the mail migration engine, should say, web access. So this is an HTML conversion that we did on a mail file, on a mail archive actually, as it was, and this allows you to have a web version, completely HTML, nothing stored in an NSF or needing a Domino server at all. This is pure HTML, allows you to see your mail that you had in an archive, still allows you to reply to that mail but also, doesn't mean that you need to have that Domino server around for seeing that archive stuff. So my final slide before we get to questions. Don't forget that we have these three offerings. We have the mail migration that we've talked through today and shown you Domino to Domino to Exchange migration, and then we've got the Exchange to Office 365 migration that we did. We've also got the identity management and access governance that's about simplifying the way you manage your users, whether that's in Active Directory or Notes and Domino or both, or Office 365. And then mail management, where you can add disclaimers, do formatting, do PGP encryption of mails as they go out from the server, single source of PGP encryption, or you can do antivirus and spam protection at that point. Even if you've got cloud-based accounts, you could still make an internal server, the SMTP gateway, and have all of that information run against your mail before it goes out to the internet. So that leaves me with time to answer some questions. I think we've done quite well. We've got to 15 minutes before the end of our time, so we have time for questions if anybody has any that they'd like to ask. Scott, are you able to open up the lines or ask questions or get questions from users?
Yes, we already have a few questions lined up, so I'm just expanding them because some of them are quite lengthy. As you can imagine, cool. This is a complicated process here for migration, so bear with me here. All right, so the first question that came in: does your mail management offering for signatures, branding, disclaimers, etc., is that now available in Office 365?
I believe it's not currently available for Office 365, but that is something we are working towards. So if you're happy for me to take your details and come back to you with that, what I'll do is I'll go to our development management team and ask them at our team meeting this week what's the schedule for that, and then I'll let you know via email if that's all right with you.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you. Next question: how are the directory users and groups migrated?
Okay, so directory. So I'm assuming that either this is right. So there's two possible answers to this. Either you're talking about a Domino address book user and group being migrated into Active Directory. That's something that we would do with our admin tool product. So that access governance and identity management would be done on a server level, and we would do that for you and with you and make sure that we get the right access levels for people and the right groups assigned over in Active Directory. We can also make sure that if you're doing Office 365, they get the right subscription assigned to them, and we can give that to you all as a web interface, so that actually we've got a whole different talk about that. But the basis of that is that we don't think that managing your directory actually should be an IT function. We think that should be where people management goes, and people management, to our mind, should go to the HR department. So we've delegated those roles and responsibilities out to a web browser function, where we can give that to HR quite happily and know that they've not got any encryption mechanisms or any keys that they need to do. So if you want to talk about the big thousands of users you've got in your address book across into Active Directory, then that would we would do with with admin tool.
Okay, and the groups as well.
And the groups as well. And yes, we would migrate everything over and make sure that everyone's in the right place. Now, if you're talking about personal address books and personal contacts, you've got two options. We can either put Client Genie on each Notes client machine, pull those up to the server, and then migrate them from a server level, or we could help with Client Genie, push those contacts and sync those contacts into the mail file, which actually there's space for them, and we can have those migrated from the mail file. Just as you saw in our demo, we had those synced in already, so all of the contacts from our personal address book in the Notes mail file came across into Exchange and then across into Office 365. And we could go straight from Notes and Domino to Office 365, but it doesn't make for a good two-part demo today.
Okay.
So hopefully that's answered your question. If not, post another one or drop me an email.
All right, perfect. How about shared mailboxes? Are they able to be migrated as well?
Absolutely. Shared mailboxes, you have certain issues when you get those out to Exchange and Office 365 and how you manage those. Or if you're talking about shared folders in Exchange, then yeah, you should give me a call or send me an email, because that's a different discussion entirely. But if you're talking about shared mailboxes where multiple people have access to a mailbox, then you have to have an owner of that. So whoever the owner is would be responsible for making sure that gets migrated, and we would use their identity to decrypt anything that's there. But yes, absolutely, we can migrate those into Exchange or Office 365.
Okay, brilliant. Not sure. Well, I guess this does have some bearing in migration. How do you handle DAOs?
How do we handle DAOs? Well, seeing as the server has access to the DAOs store and is using the notes ID to access it, if that user has access to that attachment through their mail file linkage and that appears in DAOs, then yes, we would migrate that out. As Exchange and Office 365 don't have anything like DAOs, then you would end up with multiple copies of that again.
Yep.
But there you go. We can do it, right? It's not a problem. We can access that data. If the user would access it normally through a notes client, or the server could access it to deliver mail and push stuff out, then we can access it from the add-in task.
Perfect. Oh, good question. Can you migrate from IBM Smart Cloud to Office 365?
Absolutely, we can.
And does that require you to bring it back locally first?
Absolutely not. I did this demo for a customer just the other day, actually. So if whoever that is wants to drop me an email, I can give you a personalized demo of how we actually do that. We are absolutely able to connect into Smart Cloud Notes, pretend to be the user, and then come back and push that out to Office 365.
Okay, I'm sure that'll make Paul very happy to know that. Paul, if you have some follow-up questions on that, please reach out to me or to BCC directly. I can get the questions to them. Okay, are there any limitations on mail file sizes or attachment sizes?
Only what you're prepared to allow. The thing that slows this down is the fact that you actually have to transfer the data across a network. So if you've got a really bad network connection from where you're at or where you're going to, then we're not going to be able to help you with that. But that suffice to say, there is no limitation inside the product that says you can only migrate a certain mail file size. We've got a customer who's taken a 47 gig mail file across from Notes and Domino to Exchange this year. We've done some benchmark testing on that mail file, and we think it's doable in a weekend. But that's dependent on their environment. So I can't say if it's doable in your environment, in a weekend, but with the right hardware, yeah, absolutely. There's no limitation inside the product.
Okay, brilliant. So just to let you know, Tim, I have about 7 more questions.
All right, best hurry up my answers then.
So I guess brief and to the point, and then follow up. We'll have to follow up individually here if needed. I'll try to get through everything here, guys. We'll try. All right. Okay, so the next question. How does mailbox delegation work? Say, for example, an executive admin has access to manage an executive's mailbox. So does the delegation carry over, I guess is what they're really trying to ask here.
Well, that's not anything to do with the mail data or the migration. That's to do with the administration on the other end. So yes, there is that provision in Exchange and Office 365, but you would need to configure that separately to the mail migration. I'm not sure if there's anything we can automate there. That's a good question that I would like to investigate and come back to you on.
Yep. Okay. Is it possible to route migration network load over Express Route to Azure? I don't know. I'm not sure what that's really asking. Hopefully you have an inkling there. We might have to get a rephrase on that one.
Yeah, so I think what you're trying to say is that there are special routes to get into Office 365 via the Azure cloud, And if we're doing the mail migration engine in the Azure server, in the virtual machine on Azure, then yes, we've not hit any bandwidth limits. If you have a special route into your Office 365 because you're a big enough customer, then yes, we can utilize that. We would work with Microsoft to help make sure that that happens. We're currently doing a year-long migration for a customer, and actually we're doing it with Microsoft in their local country. We're partnering with Microsoft to do that migration. So we do have help from Microsoft if we need it. We're not sat here on our own being hampered by any network bandwidth issues they give us. We do know how to work around them if we really have to.
Yep. Okay. Brilliant. So reoccurring meetings. I think you touched a little bit on this in your.
I did.
So in Domino, sometimes not so great. How are these migrated?
Different systems, different strokes for different folks. So the way that these are handled in Notes and Domino is that they set up a master appointment, and then what happens out in the real world is that they then set up a bunch of children that belong to that parent document. The parent document holds the tasks of managing the repeats. So here's I wish I could make this bigger, but if we show +3, so you can see here I've got a Starship Enterprise Command and Control meeting. If we go into that meeting and this is in Exchange, you'll see that we've got that meeting and nobody's responded to it at the moment. Now we've not set this to repeat because in our migration task we actually said that we wanted this to be set as separate entries. So if I can get back here, you'll see that this does actually repeat. We've got that there, and it repeats for 8 entries. So we got all of the 8 entries. We just, in the migration, we set them up as being standard entries rather than repeats. You can set them as repeats, and we do know how the mechanisms work differently between the two systems. You can also limit if you have an unlimited. We have found issues inside Notes and Domino when we've done migrations where some of the end dates get corrupted, so they end up being 29.99 as the end year, which clearly would break Exchange or Office because it can't cope with a date that big. So what we do is we limit those to 20 years or whatever you specify as part of the configuration document.
Okay, perfect. I mean, yeah, calendar entries are kind of weird sometimes.
Calendaring systems are a world unto themselves, bless them. Any more, Scott?
Yes. So I know it's going to be
3 minutes left.
Yeah, it's getting here tight. So if you want to stay there's a couple of like a little more complex questions. So I've kind of saved those till the end.
Okay, good.
So if you want to stay for the questions and answers, please do. I know Tim and I will stay here because this is going to be fun.
Of course.
Okay. Are mail files migrated in serial fashion, or can they be moved in parallel to decrease the time involved?
Depends where you're going and what you're doing. If you're going from Exchange to Office 365 or Exchange to Exchange, then because you've got Exchange in the way, there's a certain amount of limits that are imposed by Exchange and IIS. So you will want to be very careful about how you load up that EWS pipe, as it were. You could do 14 mail files at once with 1 EWS thread each, but we recently did a note to Office 365 migration from the Azure cloud that had 8 mail files going at once with 14 EWS threads. So they moved really fast and we were doing 8 at once. I wouldn't recommend doing much more than 8 in parallel because it starts to get a bit confusing as to what's started and what's finished. If you've automated the whole thing and we've planned it out for you, this was a bit ad hoc, this one, but if we've planned it out for you and everything's running on a schedule, then yeah, you should be able to run 10 or 15 or maybe 20 threads out to Office 365 from Domino locally or in Azure.
Okay, brilliant. Okay. Wow. All right. This is going to be kind of.
Come on, Scott. Spit it out.
This is like 4 lines here. So I'm going to read it and hopefully pause and then put the right inflections here. So I apologize to Mr. Pops. All right, we have existing Office 365 users with Azure AD Connect synchronized from local Active Directory without Exchange attributes. Is it possible to provision the mappings? Oh, wow, okay. This is where
Keep going, I'm
Is
listening.
it possible to provision mapping from notes, mail users, and mail-in databases to existing Office 365 users with Active Exchange Online licenses or shared mailboxes?
Okay, so I need you to answer me one question before I can answer that. Do they have live Exchange or Office 365 mail files individually right now, or is it only notes that they have for their mail currently as a personal end user?
They have existing Office 365 users.
Right. So having an Office 365 user doesn't mean that they're using mail or haven't provisioned mail as part of that license.
That's true. That's true.
So it's from the sounds of it, it sounds like they haven't got a note. They've got notes mail currently for that user.
Right.
They've got shared mailboxes out in Office 365, but they don't have an Office 365 email subscription currently. If that's the case, yes, we can absolutely deal with that, and we can absolutely map those users between the two systems.
Okay, perfect. And Malte, I apologize that I may not be reading these questions correctly. So, and he said yes, you understood correctly, and thank you. Okay.
Pleasure.
Okay, so when migrating users in logical groups,
yep,
like
keep reading,
HR,
yeah,
allow for. Wait a minute.
Okay. Just read it out, man.
Well, we're technical guys, and so there's a few things here.
Stop filtering. Just read it. Let's all try and answer it.
All right. When migrating users in logical groups, HR, in quotes, allow for mail flow between old or new systems, Lotus Notes, Office 365. Are changes required to address book adding @domain.onmicrosoft.com entry for migrated users?
So yes, as part of that, what to do on completion of the mail file. So if it gets to X%, then you consider that mail file to be completed with a few anomalies here and there. So we've set the bar at 93%. We see a lot better fidelity than that, to be honest with you, in lots of the migrations that we've done. We've had a couple where they've gone a lot different to that, but then they hadn't done any Domino maintenance on their mail files for ages, so that's what caused us problems. But as part of that completion task, you can have it reset the forwarding of the email, set the email addresses to be a different system. Yes, you can absolutely say that when this mail file gets to 93% completed, or whatever you decide that threshold is, do this. And the do this could be set forwarding, set ACL, set records here, there, and everywhere. You can even run a PowerShell command script to go and do something in the Active Directory to turn on a certain, mail forwarding or to get back. We can do all of that from that completion page, as it were, what to do once it's migrated.
Okay. Brilliant. Paul, if we need any more clarification, let us know. Then thank you for your question. Okay, I think I have just one more, and
awesome.
Again, and you know what? Most everyone has stayed, so this has been these are very interesting questions.
Thank you for your time, everyone.
This is great. Okay, we have a lot of NABs. Which target is it possible to migrate? Okay. Just read it. I'm sorry. It's just a little bit, and I apologize. I'm reading these questions really horribly, but I'm trying to correct as people are typing in here as well. All right. We have a lot of NABs. Which target is it possible to migrate different targets? Global address list, shared mailbox, or SharePoint online lists? So I guess, can you take from different NABs and target into different lists, maybe?
So with our admin tool, when we're migrating users from system to system, and when I say migrating user, I mean the user record. So the existence of that user in a Domino system would be a person record in the name and address book, or several name and address books. It would be an Active Directory or an account subscription in Office 365, that kind of thing, we can absolutely target what they get at the other end. So if you're taking people out of lots of different places in Domino, that's fine. If you want to push them into segmented different places in your target system, that being the Microsoft world, for what you've said, then yeah, we can absolutely target those people as to where you absolutely need them to be and what subscription or activity or access they get and where they go. We can take that down to actually this person lives here in SharePoint and they're in Active Directory and they have this subscription in Office 365 which doesn't include mail, or does, or if it does, then actually they have access to this, this and this. So yeah, we can take that and work that all out for you. Not a problem. That is quite a lot of work though. So be prepared for be prepared for a big project on that one if that's what you need to do.
Okay, perfect, and not a problem. And that question was from Malte, and I hope I pronounced the name correctly, but from Germany. So just be aware that BCC also has an office in Germany, so they'll be able to have a very nice, proper German conversation with you. So not to worry.
Of course.
Not to worry.
I can let my fabulous colleagues in Frankfurt help you out with that one.
Exactly.
I saw that Nils had the hand raised icon for a while. Did Nils have a question?
Yes, he does. But I'm looking, I don't see one typed in, so I think he's going to be typing it in now for us, maybe, hopefully, Nils.
I see a question icon next to Nils now. So
yep, it's coming up. So how about access rights for group mailboxes?
So
how's that handled?
That's one of the things that's one of the things I need to take away. So I need to work out what we do about that. As part of the mail migration, we don't take the access control list. We're purely focusing on the data itself, not the access control. Access control will be dealt with through our admin tool product, and I need to go and ask if we're able to take access control lists from mail files and shared mailboxes and migrate those across into a Microsoft environment and make sense of them. That's a question we have a takeaway for. So whoever wants an answer to that, reach out to me. I believe you can see my email address on screen. Drop me a note, tell me that you're interested in that, and I'll make sure that I include you in the answer. I may even put a blog post out about it if we can find out enough information to make that sort of a reasonable blog post rather than just a one-line answer. If it's one-line answer, I'll email you all individually. Otherwise, I'll put out a blog post and send you a link to the blog post, so it's a matter of record at that point.
All right.
Any more questions, Scott? Because I realise that we are 8 minutes over and we've taken 8 minutes of these people's time.
Yeah, but
thank you all.
Yeah, no,
great questions, right?
You've done great. You know, you're now allowed to drink some water because we all the questions are asked or answered at this point. So I think we're good. If I accidentally missed somebody's, I do apologize, but I'm going back through. I think we've got them all.
Awesome. So it just leaves for me to say thank you very much for your time. Thank you, Scott, for hosting, and thanks for listening, everyone. Hopefully today's session has been useful. If you've got any more questions, reach out to Scott or to me. You've got my contact details on screen. Scott, I'll give you the last word.
Okay, brilliant. Well, we did record this, so BCC will do a follow-up email to each of you and give you a link to where the video will be posted. I suspect it'll probably be a day or two. I do need to get this converted over for them and then delivered to them. But Tim, thank you for the presentation today. Very informative. I know we all love notes, but if we're directed to migrating away, let's do it the right way. So we appreciate your time. Have a great day, everybody.